I take it on me as the CEO of my business, as the manager of my team. Like, it's my responsibility really to make sure everything's going well. And you have to have the time and space to do that, which, if you're in the weeds doing bookkeeping or podcast editing, it gets to be really tough to do that. Welcome to Profit and Prosper, a podcast for entrepreneurs who are ready to make some money while doing what they love. On this podcast, we're going to pull back the curtain and talk about all things business and money. But I promise you, this is not your typical boring numbers talk. I'm your host, Sarah Young, a CPA and CFO with over a decade of experience in finance, business, and leadership. I'm going to share everything I've learned from helping my clients grow more profitable businesses and keep more of what they earn while growing my own successful business along the way. You'll feel empowered and confident that you too can grow your wealth, live a rich life, and have an impact. Stick with me, and you might even start to think that finance is fun. Let's dive in. Welcome back to this week's episode. I have got another interview for you this week that I'm excited for you to tune into. So this week I'm interviewing Kristen Stegall of Novice Studios. Novice Studios is a production company for podcasters who want to boost their online presence through long-form content marketing. They specialize in producing value-packed video podcasts like mine that can be repurposed as short-form content. And actually, they produce my podcast. So I wanted to have Kristen come on because I wanted her to talk about her journey that I have seen her go through as a client of hers. And then she has also been a client of mine as she's gone from freelancer who was undercharging and burned out to a business owner with a team where she is set up to take a few months off, completely off from her business for maternity leave. We talked in this episode about how she focused in on her more profitable offers and let go of the things that were not profitable so that she could make more money in the long run, how she created a plan with my help to hire her team and then executed on that plan, and some of the mindset shifts that she went through from freelancer to now being the CEO of her business and leader of her team, including how she got comfortable with purposefully taking short-term revenue and profit dips in order to take advantage of longer-term gains. Gains both in the form of being able to grow her business, but also just to have the time and space for her to step back and not be burned out anymore. So if you are in a similar boat of feeling like you are a maxed out solopreneur, or even if you have a small team and you're still feeling maxed out and you're dreaming of building a business and stepping more into that CEO role, then I think you will enjoy this week's episode. What's up, y'all? Welcome back. Kristen, I'm so excited to have you on my podcast. So for those of you who don't know, Kristen is my podcast producer, her and her team. And so I got her on this podcast because I'm a client of hers and she has been a client of mine, and we have a lot of really good stuff to talk about. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat today.
Yes. So I know we have a lot, and I know sometimes with my interviews, I can go long, as you know, but I feel like they're good. We have some really good stuff to talk about. So tell us the story of how you started your business, what you were doing, like how your offers were structured, and like how that has evolved over time, because I think this is a super interesting story.
Yes. So I started my business during the pandemic, July 2020. I was at a job that I wasn't super happy at, and I had equipment. My background's in video production. So I was like, I'd done some freelancing here and there. Let me see if I could cut it full time. So I quit my job first before getting clients. Interesting choice. It worked out for me, might not work out for everyone, but I quit my job, and then I knew that I needed help kind of immediately. I'd never started a business before. Like I said, I'd done some freelancing. I knew I was undercharging for what I was offering, but I started working with a sales coach, Lauren Woodrick. I know she's been on the podcast before. she kind of helped me with my pricing and my packaging. So I started with offering YouTube channel launches and podcast launches out the gate. I'd had a little bit of experience with podcasting, but I just knew that it was a growing medium and that people were interested in that, and that a lot of people were prioritizing video as well. So I started out offering both, and then got a bunch of video clients actually pretty immediately. Burned myself out really, really fast. Just not setting boundaries, not really planning ahead for how much time certain packages as a service provider would take. And so going into 2022, we actually let go of all of our video production clients to just focus on podcasting, because podcasts were our most profitable service that we were offering, and also they required, the least amount of resources. There was more and more growing demand for the podcast side, but I still incorporate that video production side into it. So we do video versions of the podcast. So if you've watched the video version of Profit and Prosper on YouTube, that is kind of becoming our bread and butter as a podcast production company. And so that's kind of where we are today.
Well, I have a couple of really good questions for you, I think. So, number one, I think that what you just said is super relatable to a lot of people, where you started off kind of as a freelancer, kind of just winging it, just like, hey, I'm going to figure out how do I get clients. Here's my first question, and it might be not the easiest one. How did your mindset shift? Like thinking back to 2 years ago when you were freelancing versus today, you have a team, and I know that you think more strategically as a business owner. Like, tell me about the difference in the way that you think about your business now.
I started to look at it less as, how do I make as much revenue as possible? Because with certain clients, they were paying us a ton per month for the service that we were giving them. But it was taking so much in terms of paying a team, my time of having to go to a ton of video shoots throughout the month, that it was slowly not becoming worth it. And so the mindset shift was, you know, how do we maybe decrease revenue for a little bit to open up more time and energy for us to pursue other things, do more sales and marketing activities, be more strategic with hiring as well? Because I had a team last year. We can kind of talk about the transformation of the team over the last year, but I knew that I could bring on more clients and actually have more profit, more time, and more energy from shifting to maybe, a lower monthly revenue client base. But again, that was like more important to me, was not being burned out all the time, not having to do everything myself, not having to run back and forth between video shoots all day long. I think that was the biggest mindset shift, was like, just because the revenue is amazing doesn't mean that the profit is good. And it's worth it to have more energy and time at the end of the day.
I think, one point I want to make is back when you're talking about profitability, which is amazing, and you had different offers, and so you're thinking about profitability in terms of like not just how much you're paying your team, but I know for a long time, even until a couple months ago, I think you were still doing some of the actual work, the production
Mhm.
work. And when you are a business owner, you don't get that expense of your time cost recorded on your profit and loss statement.
Right.
And so I think sometimes people forget to value your time as the business owner who's also doing the day-to-day work. And so when you step back and you said, "Hey, these video clients, maybe they're paying me more, but it's taking not just more of my team's time, but also my time, and it's sucking my energy, and it's just not what I want to do." And so like how hard was that to say I'm going to let go of my video clients?
It was probably one of the hardest things that I'd done up to that point. Number one, I like the idea of confrontation and telling a client, "Hey, we're not a good fit to work together anymore," was so nerve-wracking. And I was proud of myself for having that conversation, but they still weren't happy about it because they were happy with the work that we were doing. So I had to keep reminding myself, if we were delivering a terrible product, then they would be happy to let us go and let us walk away. But we're really good at what we do. And so, being okay with that and being okay with letting that client go, it was really, really hard, but it was definitely worth it to have so much time back and be able to just take the beginning of this year, 2022, to reflect on our packages, reflect on what we wanted to offer moving forward, and to start building that dream team of people. So I met Adam at the beginning of this year and he started editing our videos, editing our podcast episodes for our clients. And so we've had time to really, get to know each other and build that trust. And having people who are insanely talented working for you makes it so much easier to hand things off to a team member. And so super grateful for him and starting to take some of that editing off my plate. And now he edits all of our clients' podcasts. And it's like such a relief and such a breath of fresh air to have him taking care of that whole side of things.
I mean, we haven't even talked about like what's coming up for you, but like, do you think that you could be situated where you are about to take time out of your business if you had not made that shift almost a year ago?
No, there's no way. I would probably still be running back and forth to shoots. And we have one video client now, which is much more maintainable than having, a handful of them, or just the demand of that one giant client. And so pre-filming for a couple of videos for the fall was pretty manageable. But yeah, it put me in a much better situation to be able to take some time off this fall.
Yes. So I think I want to say too, I have the same thing happen where, I've talked about this. I used to do bookkeeping. And in fact, we used to do your bookkeeping,
Yes.
which I forget about sometimes because it seems like a long time ago. It's been a long year, y'all.
Yes.
So, for our remaining bookkeeping clients, I decided to not take on new bookkeeping clients last summer. So summer 2021, or really late spring 2021. But then I kept everybody on who I wanted to keep on, frankly,
Mhm.
through the end of the year because I didn't want to leave anybody in a bind. But then I said, hey, like you've heard me talk about this already. Like I know you knew it was coming, but I want to say, like, you took over doing your books because I think we had gotten it pretty clean. But like,
Yes.
I guess the point I want to make is I did the same thing where I let people go, but you're not mad at me about it,
Nope.
right?
Nope. Yeah, exactly. Because even though you did do an amazing job for me, and cleaning things up, and I had no idea what I was doing, and now it made it so much easier to maintain it on my own. I also knew kind of the direction that you were growing in your business and just admire you so much as a business owner that I was like, okay, I see. And I think it's really like you've kind of been that model for me also. And I know you've talked me through a lot of those same things that you were going through with letting go your bookkeeping clients. So yeah, I was just proud of you and excited for you.
Yes. Well, thank you for that. That's really nice. But I think just for anybody listening who, if you're thinking like, oh, I wish I could level up and just make that transition into doing the thing that I really want to do or doing the thing that is actually profitable, that actually gives me energy and gives me time back, that is a really hard transition to make. But number one, it's your business, so you can choose.
Mhm.
And number two, as long as you do it with integrity and like have clear communication, most people are going to be fine with it.
Mhm.
So it's going to be all right. Kristen and
Yes.
I both have done it. Once you've made 100K in sales, what does it take to save 100K? I'm on a mission to help 1,000 entrepreneurs turn their business's cash flow into $100,000 in wealth, whether that comes from paying off debt, saving more money, investing into retirement accounts, or reinvesting into your business to build a cash flowing asset. That's $100 million in capital in the hands of world-changing business owners just like you. Can you imagine the impact that would have? Building the first 100K in investments from your business would be life-changing. It'll teach you the money habits and financial strategy that you need to get you not just to 100K, but eventually to financial freedom. I want to help you stop being self-employed and constantly on the cash flow hamster wheel. Let's elevate you into a CEO that thinks about their money like I do. I've been hard at work here behind the scenes revamping my Profit and Prosper group program into a deeper 12-month coaching program that'll teach you my signature M4 method for building 100K in net worth. And it officially relaunches on October 24th. I'll be your CFO and financial coach for an entire year as you go through the seasons of your business. I'll help you implement my profit method and turn your business's cash flow into wealth. Go to profitandprosper.co/join now or the link in the show notes to learn more and sign up. when I asked a question about mindset, I think the main thing that I heard you say that you didn't necessarily say in these words, but I think that you started taking a long-term view of your
Mhm,
business. And
mhm,
when I think about having a business owner, even a millionaire mindset, I think that one of the skills that we have to learn is taking that long term view and choosing to do things that in the short term might mean your revenue dips. It might mean that your profitability dips, but in the long term, this is the right choice and it will
mhm.
ultimately make you more money in the long term. And that is really hard for people to do. So props to you for doing that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely been challenging to my mindset and it triggers a lot of scarcity. But again, it's been worth it just to have that time freedom. Back entering into this new season of life where I'm expecting my first baby in October and have no idea what to expect and have no idea how much time and energy, I hear it's a lot, that it demands of you. But having this team behind me that I trust to keep things running while I'm out, even though, like you said, the profitability dips dramatically, it's that peace of mind that like you can't put a price tag on.
I've told you this, and I think it sort of gave you a kick in the pants. So you did my program back in like Q2, I think. I think it was Q2.
Yes.
I get my months mixed up, y'all, all the time. And I think I told you the story then at some point of my maternity leave. As many of you guys who, if you listen to the podcast, you've probably heard me talk about like I started as a side hustle back at the end of 2018. By summer 2019, I was ready to quit my job mentally and just go full time. But then I got pregnant in July of 2019. And so I had my son in March 2020. And still at that point, I hadn't quit my job. And so I was side hustling. I did not have a team. And I remember I was still doing bookkeeping, I was still doing tax prep, all of that stuff. And I was literally, y'all, in the hospital. My husband had to bring me my laptop. I was laying in the hospital bed, you know, 10-hour-old baby in my arm, laptop on the other hand, like trying to run payroll for a client. And I remember just thinking, like, this is ridiculous. And so I think I told you that story and you were like, "Oh, okay,
It
I'm gonna
awakened
get."
something in me
Yes. You
big
don't
time.
like please don't let that be you, right?
Mhm,
And that is, I think sometimes if we have a freelance type business like you started off with, like I started off with, like you are the one
mhm.
that has to make the business go. And if, it's harder to take time off, and that's not to say, if you are a freelancer or you're self-employed, you're a solopreneur, like you can plan ahead. But
Mhm.
for me, I had not learned the skill of the pricing and profitability and just the processes I needed and all of that to be able to take the time off. And so it really takes some planning. So talk to me about like what are the things you have put into place over the last like 6 months or so that are going to enable you to take leave and hopefully almost completely disconnect from your business, as long as you want to.
Yes, exactly. So once we were out of the first trimester, I was like, all right, this is really happening. It's time to start planning for the whole rest of the year. And I knew that I wanted, like you said earlier, a long-term fix and not just a band-aid fix for, okay, how do I keep things running for 3 months while I'm out, but in like the jankiest way possible. I really wanted it to be a seamless process. I wanted there to be a really strong team in place. And so you've talked about on the podcast before, how do you know what's your next big investment in your business? So I knew the first thing was I needed to get a really good handle on my numbers so that I knew who all I needed as a team member, how much could I afford to pay them, how many hours would they be working. And so that's when I started the Profit and Prosper program, which I highly recommend. Doors open October 24th. And I got a handle on like my banking systems, making sure that those were really clean. Like I said, Sarah had already been doing our books for a long time. And so I knew that my QuickBooks were really, really clean, but I couldn't see like how much money did I really have in savings versus how much is supposed to be set aside for taxes, that type of thing. So I followed Sarah's profit first method to kind of clean up the back end financially. And then she helped me put together a financial forecast so I could see exactly what I could afford. I can kind of play around with like different roles and what would be the pay ranges for those, and, get that together. And then my next big investment was working with a hiring consultant. So I worked with Karen Weeks, and she helped me with the whole process of, again, what are the roles that I need? What are the job descriptions for that? How do I write a job description that attracts the best people possible? And that was a huge thing, and making sure that our core values were a part of that. Because again, like you said, it can be really hard to hand things off to somebody else when you've been doing them for so long and have this idea of a standard in your head of how things should be done. But I knew that if I could be really strategic about hiring, it would make that transition a lot easier. So those were kind of the two big things. And then I worked with our current operations manager, Jake. He came onto the scene in March and helped me with documenting all of our processes into documents that could be handed off to a team member, capturing video tutorials for things that might need a little bit more fine tuning, since a lot of what we do is really technical, but also capturing like what is our standard of work for what we offer. Like, what is it about our show notes that sets us apart from other producers? And how do we keep doing that? How do we make that a replicable process? And so we started that process in March so that by the time we brought on our podcast manager, Raina, we were about 80% done with all of the SOPs and kind of were able to find extra ones that we needed to create to make sure that she had a reference that she can kind of look at as she's going through things. And we brought her on in August. So it's been a little bit of drinking through a fire hose for her, I think, of getting her up to speed on all of our clients before I go on leave in October. But I think because we took our time with that hiring process, I know that we hired the right person. And so she's been able to pick things up really, really quickly, ask great questions, help me understand things that maybe was doing a complicated version of, or a very like in a bass backwards way of doing things, that I was used to doing it that way. And I was like, actually, I think we can really simplify this process, and then teaching her the more simplified process. So those were kind of the steps that I've taken since March to get things together and get things organized for leave.
Just a few things, not a big deal.
Yeah, it's been a
No,
lot. It's been a lot.
it
Mhm.
is a lot. And number one, again, back to the long-term view, this happened to me too when I hired my right-hand person, Sean. So she is another CPA. She's basically our accounting manager controller for all of our CFO clients. She has the brain of like, I'm going to get it done. I'm going to like lay it all out. It all makes sense. She's the very detail oriented person. Meanwhile, if you know anything about human design, I'm a manifester, which kind of means it explains a lot about my personality, y'all. But, anyways, I remember, and I know this has like happened to you too, where you're like, you have the chicken and the egg situation sometimes with hiring where you either like you have to hire them first and then grow your revenue. And then if you do that, then you're going to take a hit from your profits, right? Because if
Mhm.
you hire them before you expand your sales, then it gives you the time to expand your sales, but then you have to be okay with like, hey, maybe there are going to be a couple months where I don't have enough money to pay myself. For example, right? That happened to me and I was fine with it. I was lucky enough my husband was in a corporate job at the time when I hired her. And I had that stability in my personal life, but I also like to advocate for, if you know this is coming, start building up your cushion ahead of time so that you have that savings sitting there. And I know that you have it because that was one of the things when we talked about money management, setting up the bank accounts, like you've been working on that for a long time. Like the chicken and the egg situation, though, like what I see other people do is you wait a really long time until you get your revenue up. And then when you hire somebody, maybe you still have that profitability there. But I'm not sure I recommend that for anybody because then it's even more of drinking from a fire hose, right? And I
Mhm.
know you said this before, but like when you hired her, it exposes all of the crazy things that you've been doing that don't make any sense to anybody else except for in your head.
That's exactly how I describe it, is the chicken and the egg situation that I think people don't talk about when it comes to hiring a team, because yes, we could have brought on, I think, like a ton more clients, and there was the demand for it. Another thing I did in March because I knew I needed to enter a season of stabilization and like pause on the growth a little bit was to take my discovery call link off of my website and put up a wait list for people to fill out and be okay with not taking on new clients for a little bit. And we could have brought on, I think, a ton of new clients to have a ton of revenue, but I was already drowning with the clients that we had. And so then there's no time to create the SOPs that you need to bring on a team. So there's the chicken and the egg situation there. But also, like you said, from that profitability standpoint and raising our prices, I knew that we had to improve our user experience or our client experience a little bit before we could kind of justify raising our prices. Our rates are already a little bit higher than other podcast producers. We do a lot more than a lot of podcast producers do, especially on the video side. But I knew that in order for me to bring on more clients and to justify a price increase for all of our monthly retainer clients, people needed to be getting deliverables sooner, have time to give us feedback on things before episodes went live. And like nothing, crazy bad was going out. Like the work was good. But I knew that we could streamline things a lot more, make things a lot easier for clients to get raw materials to us for their podcasts and just improve that whole client process a little bit more. And I knew I needed a team first to do that. So that was my newest chicken and the egg is like our profitability has decreased a lot, but I think our user experience is getting a lot better. And so that's going to help to, raise our rates in 2023.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting you said, you wanted to go into stability mode. I think we tend to either be in growth mode or profit mode, right?
Mhm,
Or
mhm,
stability mode. You can call it growth, profit, or stability mode, but I think being in a stage of growth is great, but you definitely can't sustain that over time. And so then you got to step back and say, okay, now I've built up to my next level of capacity. Let me stabilize there for a bit. And then you start putting your pieces into place. And so
mhm,
you did go through that stability mode where you could build up your savings, where you were able to pay yourself. And then that sets you up, I think, to be better to where when you do go into growth mode again, you hire new team members, you increase your expenses. If you have a dip in your profitability, it's okay because
mhm.
one, I know you know how to get clients now. You have sales and marketing processes, you have the delivery processes all laid out, and you've also put things into place so that you can offer a higher ticket service instead of saying, I mean, I know we've had this conversation, right? Of commodity, the commodity that is, podcast editing, video editing, like I can go out and find a ton of people to edit a podcast. And that's not to say like, yes, there's people who are better or worse, but that is more of a commodity versus how do you differentiate yourself from other podcast production companies and offer that like higher level service that you can charge for, right? And so
Yeah.
you've definitely done that. And I mean, I'm excited to see where you go in 2023. The other thing I want to talk about too is I think deciding how much to pay people. So I
Mm,
remember we had this conversation again when we were working on like your kind of plan, right?
mhm,
Laying out if you hire these people, this is how much time it's going to take, this is how much revenue you need to cover that and still pay yourself, right? And I remember that there was some like back and forth around how much should I pay somebody? Because as a business owner, right, like you have to balance. You're the type of person I know who wants to treat people really well. You want to pay people fairly. We're not trying to get somebody internationally who's going to charge us $2 an hour. Like,
right.
right? And so, like, how did you work through that? Like, figuring that out because, the more you pay somebody, the less as a small business owner can go into your pocket. So, like, how did you work through that?
The first thing is that I kind of tried the like entry level team members for a lower rate route. And the time that it took to kind of train them for, not just the job itself, but also kind of training them on how to operate as a professional, in this new phase of, their professional life, took a lot of time and energy, and it was almost causing double work, and having to, there having to be a lot of fixing things, that again was like, okay, the profitability is great, but the time and energy is not where it should be for having a team member take things off your plate. And so I knew that one, paying people more was going to give me much better quality of team members. And two, I knew that eventually I wanted to venture into having full time employees and W-2 employees. And so paying a higher hourly rate also kind of allowed me to get my feet wet, if you will, of, having that bigger monthly expense in terms of people, and kind of get me primed and ready to make sure that my revenue was where it needed to be to make that happen in 2023. And it's definitely looking like that with, with the workload that we have now. And then also the interest that we have from that wait list and people reaching out to me to launch their shows in 2023 already. Those were two factors that went into it. But I think having that financial forecast and actually saying like, okay, I would love to pay my team members this much, but if I do that, I can't afford them. And so I need to scale it back a little bit to allow room for it to grow, to allow room for hours to increase over time and things like that. And so it was just a lot of planning. And I think that helped me be really confident when I put out that job description with the hourly range as a part of that job description, and be proud of, what we're paying our team members. And so definitely take your time kind of planning it out. Like, don't jump into it and be like, I'm going to pay everyone their worth, if you will, of like, $100 an hour. And it's like, I would love to be able to pay people that much, but is that feasible? Is that doable with the work that we're doing? And so being realistic, but also trying to be as generous with your team as possible.
And it's a hard balance, I think, but I think it's helpful too to step back and think about like what are the things that you value? Like what kind of business do you want to run, right? And
Mhm.
like making sure that your team members that you hire are aligned with that. I mean, my team members are not cheap either, but I try to have a good balance of the higher level, higher
Mhm.
paid people, and then also leveraging more administrative type team members too, and like having a good balance. So I see clients too where they get really top heavy and then their payroll gets really expensive. And I'm like, hey, like we need to start delegating some of
Mhm.
these things. And so that's something that I continually work on and something I know you work on too, because I remember saying to you, are you still editing? I think you're still editing my podcast, Kristen. Like, you have to delegate the editing. You have to stop. Like, I remember saying that,
Mhm.
right? And I do
Yes.
that with my team too. Like, I just this past week had a meeting with my team where I said, hey, I've been holding some of this reporting stuff in my head and some of this tax stuff in my head. Let's talk about the process for you guys taking that over so that I don't have to do it anymore. And, pushing down like the standard sort of repeatable tasks. But that is why it comes back to having taking the time and making an investment of time or money into, like you did, making SOPs, right?
Mhm.
Like writing down the process, documenting the process so that when you do hire employees, they are set up to be successful because they know what you want, what you want them to do, how you want them to do it, when you want them to do it, and then it makes your clients happier. Like it was a lot of work, as I'm sure people can hear you say, but totally worth it. So, my next question is what do you think will come next? Like, you are going on your leave
Mhm.
and coming back in 2023 with a young baby, as many of the people listening can totally relate to. Like, what do you see coming in 2023?
I definitely see it as, I think, a big growth year for us. And moving into year 3 of business, I've gotten a much better feel for what our sales cycles are, and throughout the year as well. So one of the things that I was a little bit maybe even not even nervous about because I didn't recognize it until the last couple of months, but we do a lot of sales in Q4. And so if I'm taking a break from discovery calls, what does that look like to set us up for 2023? And so, for this summer, I saw that maybe we needed a little bit of extra capital to make the numbers work, both from a monthly retainer perspective and just to have like some extra cash to be able to manage all the new expenses that we have. And so I took on two new launch clients because I know that those are like basically 100% profitability. And then I could just invest that cash back into the business or put it into savings to be in an even better spot for the fall. Um, there were a lot more inquiries than the two launch clients that we took on. So following up with them over the last couple of weeks and just letting them know, hey, if you pay your deposit by September 30th, we'll lock you in for your 2023 January, February launch date, and we can kick off in December, knowing that all that requires from me, time and energy wise, is to be on a couple of calls in December. And that feels so much more manageable than having to do like all the, the monthly retainer work and try to also hustle to make sales in the throes of maternity leave. So I think for 2023, it's going to be onboarding those new clients, launching some new shows, and then maybe entering another stabilization season in Q2 to get used to that workload and see what that looks like for the team's capacity and for my capacity. And then we tend to have another rush in the summertime. So looking at things like that, I can see it. Q1's usually a big growth spurt, and then we stabilize, and then we grow in the summer, and then we stabilize in the fall before making sales for 2024.
Okay, a couple things you said that I thought were really good. Number one, I'm glad you talked about the launch package. One of the key things I love to talk to people about is it's as simple as in your reporting. Probably 95% of clients I see coming in when I look at their P&L, and this is clients of any size. I've got, 8-figure clients who do the same thing. It doesn't make any sense.
Mhm,
Having all of your sales on your P&L as one line, sales. What does
mhm,
that mean? And I'm like, well, what's making money? Which package are people buying? Is there seasonality to any of the packages? And so that's one of the things I like to break out. So, like in your case, it was, hey, here's podcast clients, here's video clients back when you were still, doing that as a primary service, but being able to break out with your offers, how much money are you making from each one so that you can then very confidently say, I'm sure you kind of knew it already, but like having the data there to back it up, like when we do launches, that is just straight cash flow, you
mhm,
know, because it doesn't require all of the back end work. It's just basically, you and your time, which again,
mhm,
like, yes, there is a cost to that, but it's basically just straight profitability. And I remember several months ago, you were like, I can't take on any more of these launch clients because I'm so at capacity over here.
mhm,
And so I think that by finally letting go of the day to day stuff enabled you to take on more launch clients, which increases your profitability and then fills up the retainers for the rest of the year, right?
yep.
So smart.
I tried, and I definitely, needed, like, that extra push from you to, like, show me in my financial forecast, "Okay, you can, pocket this cash," and by pocket, I mean it is all going into savings or towards expenses, but I was like, "Can I even do 2 launches this summer? Like, is that something that's doable for me?" But the more I was able to kind of delegate my team, the easier that became to handle those launch clients, and so it just made sense. It's like everything is the chicken or the egg of like which piece do you do first? And it just made sense to have a little bit of a cash injection into the business to carry us out into Q4, and have a couple of new retainer clients lined up there. But like you said, pretty much 90% of our launch clients end up going to the retainer package. And I knew that I couldn't take on more of those until I increased our capacity with the team.
So there you go. All the pieces like lining up really nicely. The other thing that I want to point out you talked about is seasonality. And that is something I think in my first year of business, I couldn't see, but now I'm past 2 years full time and I guess almost coming up on 4 years since side hustle. Like, oh my God, like that's crazy. But I can definitely also see a seasonality too. in my business where we take on clients more heavily at certain times of the year. And so that has me thinking, if I know, for example, that summertime for me is slow, then how can I structure things so that, during the busy time, how can I increase our capacity to take on more clients because they're coming to me? And
Mhm.
then, getting that already sort of filling up the pipeline. And then, so when we go into the slower time, we have the higher retainer level because we took on the clients, right? And then that also enables us to go into a profit mode or a stability mode. And so something I've been thinking about too, because for me, and I know yours is probably similar, where the onboarding stage of clients is actually a pretty heavy lift, especially for us. Like we have to go back in many cases and do a lot of cleanup work.
Mhm.
And so something that I like to talk about, especially with clients, I don't think I've actually talked about this much on the podcast, but thinking about your expenses in terms of ongoing recurring overhead versus projects. And so if you know that you have a heavy season of you're going to have a lot of inquiries during Q4, for
Mhm.
example, or over the summer, then maybe there's that heavy push, right? Where you do need to have more capacity. And in that case, maybe instead of hiring a new team member for that higher level of capacity, you say, hey, I'm going to get some project work, maybe a few contractors here. And then I know that 6 months later or 3 months later, things will steady out and
Mhm.
you've just got your standard sort of overhead expenses. So really knowing your numbers enough to know this is my recurring overhead that I need to budget for on an ongoing basis. And then
Mhm.
these are my like one-time projects, investments, things that I need to get me to the next level, which I know you did and you might not have thought about it that way, but I think talking about seasonality, you will recognize this when you're in business for a long time. And so like take advantage of the times when people are coming to you, right?
Yes. And it did take a couple of years for those patterns to really emerge of like what do our seasons look like in our business. But I think also embracing those like stabilization, like stabilizing is still growth in a way. Like getting used to a new workload or getting used to new clients and making sure that those relationships are being nurtured, that is still growth in your business, even if you're not sending out a ton of new invoices within that quarter, right? It always feels good to send deposit invoices and all that good stuff. But once that work starts to hit, that is also like you need that downtime to just get used to that new workload. And now with having a team, like I said, I didn't want a Band-Aid fix. I wanted this team to continue with me into 2023 and not just be a temporary team. And so I also need to make sure that I'm checking in with them about their capacity and what they can take on and seeing if we need to increase hours, if we need to bring on new team members to accommodate the new work. And that I think when you're a solopreneur or a freelancer, you're kind of like, "Oh, I'll figure it out. Like I'll deal with it. I'll figure it out. I'll just like take on as many as I can and make it work." But again, with treating your team well, I don't want them to be burnt out. And I want to make sure that our clients understand our new processes and that we're kind of cleaning up anything that might not be working within the new processes and just adjusting over these next few months. And so that's something to think about too is like, what's your new team's capacity? You can't just take on a ton of new clients and be like, okay, guys, it's all yours now. Making sure that they're okay with it as well.
Yeah. Well, I think it requires stepping into a whole new role of being an actual CEO. Like a lot of people, we call ourselves a CEO, and that's true, but like really having that role of leadership, right?
Hmm.
Leading a team of other people in addition to your clients and your community, but also your team and, managing them, which is probably a whole different skill set from leadership, but that brings up a whole new thing which again, to do that well, I mean, y'all, I've seen clients who don't do it well. Frankly, you have
Hmm.
to have the time and space to be the CEO in order to lead your team in the right way, right? Otherwise, they're just gonna
100%.
right, they're gonna fail. They're not gonna and it's not necessarily gonna be their fault. It's gonna be, I take it on me as the CEO of my business, as the manager of my team, like, it's my responsibility really to make sure everything's going well, and you have to have the time and space to do that, which, if you're in the weeds doing bookkeeping or podcast editing, it gets to be really tough to do that.
Yes, and we talked a lot about, trusting people enough to hand things to them as members of your team, but does your team trust you? Like, are you showing up for them well? And do they feel like they can tell you when things aren't working? And do they feel like they can tell you when they're at or over capacity? That's a really important thing too. And Karen has walked me through a lot of that as well. And do you have a cult? Now you're building a culture. Like, it's not just you anymore, and it's not just the core values that you put together, but it's like you have to teach your team what those core values are. And hopefully you're bringing on people that kind of embody them already, but they have their own personal values that they're bringing to the table as well. And are you listening to them on that? And so that's been a journey. And I think my maternity leave reading list is about leadership and managing teams, because that's kind of, like you said, the next big phase of my business is sharpening those skills.
Yeah, and they are skills that you have to learn over time, and that's a very different skill set than being a freelancer or being a solopreneur, and so it's just something that you build. So, well, I'm excited. I mean, I think that you have put a ton of work in. I always love to sit back and, like, look big picture at what have you accomplished? What are the things that you've done in the last, you know, 6 months, year, 2 years? I think a lot of times we don't step back and really think about that and, like, celebrate. I know I don't. I just tend to do the thing and move on to the next thing. So, I think this is really fun. I guess
Yeah.
my last sort of question, do you have advice for anybody who was you 6 months or 12 months ago? Like, if you could just tell them one thing, what would you tell them?
I would tell them, or maybe ask them, if they're happy with the work that they're doing. I don't think that you have to be like so passionate. Like, I'm not so passionate about podcasts that I would like die to continue producing them. But I think that the clients that we work with and the content that they put out is what I'm passionate about. And I found myself, a year ago, 18 months ago, in a situation where I was like, "Ugh, I'm not like really feeling the content that we're spending all of this time on, and I'm just not that connected to it." And my advice would be to give yourself permission to let that go, or to pivot towards something that you enjoy doing a lot more. And just to listen to your body's cues if you're burning out, if you're constantly working. There's definitely seasons and times where a little bit of hustle is called for. But if it's constant and you're just like burning yourself out on stuff that you don't even enjoy doing, just don't be afraid to burn it all down and start over. It's
That
worth it.
is such good advice. Honestly, so going back to again, like, what are your values? And you can, I'm with you. I don't know if I necessarily agree that, like, I'm that passionate about accounting and taxes, right? But you go
Yeah.
back to your values. Hopefully, you enjoy producing my podcast where I'm trying to empower more
Mhm.
women to make more money, build their wealth, build their power. And I know your other clients do not necessarily what I do, but they have a mission too. And so, like, if I'm able to support other people who are mission driven, who are world changers, does that not
Mhm.
also make me a world changer? And that's something that
Right.
I've been thinking about a lot lately. So, I think
Yeah.
that's really great advice. And I think too, like, bringing on clients who are in line with that and it makes you more excited to show up to work. It helps me hire a good team because when I talk about my mission in my job description, it's hard for people actually to find accountants these days because it's just the nature of the job market. But anytime I've gone to hire people because I have that mission that I go back to, and I'm like, look, you're going to work with business owners, you're going to help them make more money, you're going to help them create jobs. Like literally, we are. And
Mhm.
that just helps your business all around. So I think that's really great advice. Final question, which hopefully you know because you've probably listened to all
I'm
my
ready.
interviews.
I'm
Yes.
ready. Let's do it.
Okay. What is your life upgrade?
So, our big dream is to build a house in Asheville that's like mountainside, mountain views. We love Asheville. We got married at Highland Brewing Company. We have like beer tattoos. We're all about that life. And so, a big mountain house that, has views of just like the Blue Ridge Mountains, that you can sit outside, have your cup of coffee, and then maybe even like a guest house for people to come stay with us. Yeah, that's like our big life goal, ultimately, is to be able to build that house. So that's our big luxury. We're big homebodies, so we're not really big into like um I don't know, like the luxury items. It's more about like how can we invest back into our house because that's where we like to hang out most of the time. So a big bougie house is our big goal.
Yes. And I guess, sometimes when I talk about this, people are like, "Oh, I'm not about like the spending the money and the luxury, but it's really to me about what it represents."
Right.
Right? Because my goal similarly is my lake house, and it represents the freedom to do something I love in a place that I love with my family, to be able to have that, like, give that experience to my kid, right? Like,
Mhm.
I certainly didn't grow up with a bougie mountain house or lake house, right? And I'm fine, like, to be
Mhm.
clear, I'm mostly fine. But that's just something like that, it just represents me being able to give that to my family using this is the crazy part that I've been thinking about, using my ideas, right? And
Mm.
my
Mhm.
brain and my, like, capabilities that just sort of mind blowing to me, and it's the same for
Yeah.
you, so that's exciting. Alright,
Yeah.
well, where can we find you? How can people work with you? If somebody wants to launch a podcast, what do they need to go do?
You can follow us on Instagram at Novice Studios CLT. We don't really post there super often, but you can DM me and we can chat in the DMs. If you're interested in us launching your podcast in 2023, we have our wait list that you can fill out at novicestudiosclt.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn if you want to chat over there. I love chatting with people in the DMs if you just have general podcasting questions. I love to talk about things like that. So don't hesitate to reach out.
Yes, and like I said at the start, you know, Kristen and team, they produce my podcast. I have had plenty of people who reach out and say, "Hey, like your podcast quality, the sound is good. I love the things you talk about, all of that." I mean, certainly I come up with the ideas, but we sat down a couple of weeks ago and mapped out, hey, I'm like, "Hey, here's what I want to sell. Here's my goal. Like, here's what I need to talk about." And we literally sat down and said, it's just really helpful for me to have somebody else who's saying, "Okay, maybe we focus on this. Maybe we
Mhm.
talk about these things. Like, don't forget to not go on for an hour in your solo episode, Sarah." Like, stuff like that is just, really helpful to me to have. So definitely go
Yes.
check out Kristen. And I'm so appreciative that you came on here. I think this was a really great story that I 100% am sure a ton of people can relate to. So hopefully you can see all the things that she has done and how she's come out on the other side.
Yep, we'll have to do a follow-up, and I'll let you know how maternity leave went, and, like, how it felt. I feel like the mindset of it's taking a total big step back from work and just letting yourself rest and do nothing for a little bit is gonna be challenging as a high achiever, but I'm also really ready for a break.
You deserve a break. You're going to need a break. We all know this. Anybody who has a kid knows this. But I think also, like, just giving yourself the choice is what's
Mhm.
key. I did not have the choice. I had to, run payroll for people when I was in the hospital. But you have the choice. And I think that's the great part.
Mhm.
And that's the whole point, right? The
Yes,
freedom, the
absolutely.
power to make that choice. So, well, this was so good. I appreciate it. And I will see everybody next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Now, I want you to go take some action. What's one thing you can do this week to create more profit in your business? Send me a DM on Instagram at YoungCoCFO and share your action item with me. If you have a question or topic you'd like me to dive into, or if you're feeling empowered about taking charge of your finances, let's continue the conversation. Go to profitandprosper.co to submit a question or topic for me to talk about on the show. And because we all profit and prosper better with friends, please leave me a review on Apple Podcasts, subscribe wherever you listen, and share the episode. Make sure you tag me at YoungCoCFO on Instagram so I can give you some love, and I'll see you in the next episode.